All right, yeah, let's get into it. I guess my top line is like, this has been an information war, but that is not the question. The first question, so you've shown an intense interest in Ukraine over the past few days, as have many others, as reporters, correspondents, communications, politicians, and hackers.
Yes.
So what is your book about, and what has it got to do with Ukraine or Russia and Russia?
Well, the one I'm writing at the moment and just finishing off. So in fact, the book, it's really, really interesting to me what's been going on in Ukraine. Everybody's been talking about the fact that we're fighting. I mean, I think Carole Cadwalladr called it the first great information war that we're seeing. In fact, my book is an attempt to show that actually it's been happening for a very long time, and I don't mean since 2014 with the Russian incursions into Donbass. I don't mean since Trump and Brexit and Russian disinformation. I mean since about 1999. So the great project, it's the birth of the great Putinist project of make Russia great again, if you can call it that, was in Kosovo. And we are seeing a lot of the techniques that were premiered there. That is the crowdsourcing of cyber attacks. That is information war as part of a spectrum that isn't separate from cyber war or physical warfare, so this idea of total war, in which every click effectively is a potential act of war, in which every human in the theatre is a potential either. A civilian is also taking an active part. That's not to say they're combatants, but that's to say that they are assets to be unleashed or turned or used by either side. I mean, this is
knowingly or not knowingly.
Often knowingly, and we can look at the way in which we have the Ukrainian government the night before last put out a call to hackers in Ukraine and in the diaspora worldwide, and everyone else who was passionately interested to join in and become part of what it called the Ukrainian IT army, joining in to take down and hit strategic Russian targets online. So everything from banks to airlines to the Russian parliament and Russian strategic command. I mean, so sometimes it's knowingly, but sometimes it's unknowingly, and that's what we saw. I think it's a kind of it unifies the idea that that's actually what we've seen with let's say the rise of Trump and Brexit and so on, is the creation of, whether you want to call them useful fools or whether you want to call them kind of there's this word floating around, so and so is an asset, so and so is a Russian asset, and actually I've always found that to be a very frustrating word. It covers a multitude of sins. So that could mean, and in intelligence circles, it can mean somebody who is an informant, paid or lent on or otherwise, who just isn't a member of the intelligence service, but is effectively a spy. Or it could mean somebody who is just bumbling along and doing things that the accuser claims is useful to the opposition, in which case it's just about everybody on earth. So I mean, the interesting thing to me is how undetected, and I think what it comes down to is we in the West, and I'm going to say the West, meaning, we all know that when we talk about the West, we're probably talking about parts of global South as well. We're talking about I suppose
it's connected on the internet. You mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And
everywhere.
I suppose in the democratic world, we are used to seeing that we have, America's got Silicon Valley. NATO has weaponry which is by some orders of magnitude more advanced and more capable than anything that let's say Russia has. However, to a man or woman with a hammer, the whole world looks like a bag of nails. And we have been very, very poor at recognizing that war is not a binary thing that is on or off. It is not something that it used to be in the 20th century, something that people declared. And once they'd declared it, everybody charged ahead, and these weapons are going to be used and those weapons are going to be used against us. And we all know how that's going to work. It's become a continuum. It's become, I suppose the thesis in my book is that this continuum between cyber war, operations of influence and open warfare is a little bit like the way the internet itself has changed, is now an always on activity. It's the slow, continuing, distributed entrepreneurial push for advantage.
So often people do get their news off the internet, but they also watch a lot of TV as well.
Yeah.
And so there's and Netflix is like it's brought a lot of TV that wasn't available to us to our sitting rooms or living rooms, whatever we want to call it. So can I ask, have you watched Homeland?
I did. Yeah. Well, I mean, I watched like series 1 a long time ago, I think.
Okay. So I was going to say to you that there is one series where they have a sort of a trolling farm, a click farm, and they're like sort of mobilizing against this new president who looks like she's going to be all about civil liberties and so on. And, it goes into all sorts so areas, and it looks at kind of the sort of MAGA, people, and so how and they look at it too. It's like very professionalized, sort of Russian troll farms funded by Russia, but also in connection with the state, who are also the state apparatus, not the president, but around them, who didn't want this woman to be president. Connected together. But on the other hand, you've got this person who runs the troll farm is found out, and he goes off to hide in hiding, and he's in hiding amongst like the for want of a better word, the proletariat. The grassroots people who are for picking up their guns and fighting against the state and so on. So I was just wondering if you'd seen that, because also there's a series set in Germany where there's a lot of this sort of thing going on, and hackers and so on. And I just wonder if some of the people you're talking about who are unknowingly doing this stuff are actually, watching the TV rather than, the internet.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is the great misconception is that cyber war, for example, is something carried out in dark bunkers. Or even organised troll farm company. I mean, I know we've got the Internet Research Agency in St. Petersburg, which is effectively, a kind of a troll farm masquerading as some sort of media agency, and that's the easy thing to see in a way, because we can imagine, when people talk about Chinese hackers have brought down this, or China is behind great cyber attacks on here, or Russia is behind. The easy thing to imagine is ranks and ranks of desks and lots of people sort of having, but a lot of the time that's just that may exist, but that's just part of, and it's almost in some ways the least interesting part of what's happening, because let's say, like any business in a way, in the business you've got the people who are shareholders in the business, they own the business. Then you've got the employees of the business. Then you've got freelancers of the business. Then you've got the contact network. Then you've got people who'll do a favor for a favor. And you've got all these things running outside of the business that are pushing to help the business achieve its aims. And so it is with cyber war. And I mean, I think so we're seeing in Ukraine. If we look at, let's say, I'll take China because it's an example that people find impossible to think about. But imagine I'm replicating this for Russia or for anywhere else. You do have, yes, absolutely, a few people, as it were, government employees working on stuff. However, you've also then got, they've created. I like to call them hacker industrial complexes, which effectively are non-employed. They might be students. China and Russia have both created an influencer hacker economy. So they've got influencers effectively who are, if you like, our version of influencers, all over Instagram, but they're not. They're all over Pastebin, and they're all over hacks, and they've got their own websites, and they've got their own HQs. And they're effectively kind of semi-detached. And then they've got, the idea that because they've created this sense that hacking is cool and hacking is a thing that people can do, then you've got these ranks and ranks of this thing that people call script kiddies, who are the wannabes who will get involved. And with things that we're seeing in Ukraine, some of the direct denial of service attacks, they count on just numbers, sheer numbers. So these people are happy to swell an attack, take down a server, and become the infantry. So I think, if we like Brexit, which obviously, I'm still absolutely living in cold grief about and anger. But Brexit is a really interesting example. People looked for a reason or a demographic as to why that happened. And actually, the reason it happened was because several things, including people who couldn't really normally give a fuck, but were persuaded to give a fuck, and then the terminally aggrieved, and then the elderly Tories, and then all kind of came together. And so it is with cyber war. And this is what we're seeing in swelling the Ukrainian effort. If we think about it, that, the government has put out an official call for hackers to join its, I was on the Telegram group, and it had swollen by about 30 minutes after that announcement to 10,000 members. Now, not all of those people are going to be in Ukraine at all. Internet connections there are currently unstable, working, etc. A lot of them are going to be the global diaspora. A lot of them are going to be people who are wanting to give Russia a bloody nose, as indeed we've seen with people, from 2014, 2016, wanting to give NATO a bloody nose, going right back to the Russian cyber attack on Estonia in 2007. And really, I think people are realizing in statecraft and in conflict situations, people are realizing that the things that work in, and this is going to sound terrible, but that advertising and brands are way ahead of them.
Okay.
And that by using some of what brands and advertising use, whether it's saturation, push marketing techniques to get more people involved, share, don't forget to share, and why not do this?
So you see advertisers as like the pioneers, because I was just going to say, listening to you, it's like there are no borders on the internet. I mean, our Home Secretary, our Home Office, and so they're very concerned about borders, but there is none on the internet. And so these people are effectively breaking down borders. Would you agree? Or
I think that's right. I mean, I think there's a. We knew, and I saw all this. I was involved, and I was questioned by MI5 actually in 2000 on suspicion of being a Serbian spy. It was really, and the reason was because I'd phoned in something that had arrived without me wanting it to on my computer through email. That was a list of NATO's battle plans, the peacekeeping forces rules of engagement and battle plans for when they swept into Kosovo, and who we should be arresting and who we should be, under what circumstances we should shoot to kill. And all of this ended up on my computer one day, and I got I phoned it in, and I actually called my editor at one of the papers, and the editor sort of phoned MI5, and they came down to question me. And the thing is, they couldn't believe.
Your editor have a responsibility to call MI5 about it?
No, they didn't, and I'm a little bit annoyed that they did that.
Yeah, okay.
That wasn't cool, and I was a freelancer. I mean, that really wasn't cool. Anyway, they ended up backing me up a little bit after that. But so the thing is, they couldn't believe they were playing the game of. I'm just going in here to talk about just for a moment the idea that. Private, business and media and agencies are the pioneers. The guys who came in to question me were clearly looking for somebody who had committed physical acts of espionage and had a physical human network. When they had it explained to them, when I was explaining that this is just the result of a Trojan, it was very much like trying to explain your pop tastes to your mum and dad. They
this
were
was in the year
well,
2000, yeah. So they're
absolutely.
Not,
this was in 2000. I mean, but they were like, well, you're talking about all this, but really, what we're looking for is who you gave the secret. I'm like, no, you fools,
mate.
You fools. And so the thing is, it was clear to me even then, I suppose, that the command structures that people that exist inside intelligence networks, intelligence agencies, and militaries and governments are antithetical to the kind of entrepreneurial approach that brings communications breakthroughs or allows people to bend the rules a little bit to do something. And actually, that great, there's one of the really interesting things that happened in the 90s is, one, there was the internet, but two, at the very same time the internet came along, if you think about it, we were telling, so the Soviet Union collapsed, and we were telling everybody in Eastern Europe and the rest of the world do you know what? It's dog eat dog out there. You do what you can. You leverage what you can. Just make, Tom Friedman was writing in the Lexus and the Olive Tree. $1 the same as one vote. You leverage it. You get it. You do what you can. And we were telling them that effectively there were no rules. And at the same time, we gave them the internet. The Eastern Internet was born along very, very different lines. The Eastern Internet from the very beginning has been, it's not been something where there's been a Silicon Valley that's been in bed with governments, where Google got seed funded by the NSA and so on. It was something far more dissident to begin with. Now, I watched that happen in Serbia, where the dissident hackers against Milosevic very quickly, as soon as Belgrade came under bombardment from NATO, they turned against NATO and started taking down the White House website and taking down, because we are talking about the crowdsourcing of online action that has real world outcomes. And that to me is fascinating.
Yeah, I think your book is going to be fascinating, but I'm going to move on to the next question.
Yeah, go on.
yeah, no problem. So I was going to ask, so which is the last conflict that you watched closely like this, like you have been doing with Ukraine? Yeah. And were you around for the Arab Spring? What communication platforms were you watching, or what were you doing in that?
The Arab Spring was... So the last one that I've been passionately and fully invested with, unfortunately, was the overrunning of Afghanistan, which I was trying to. I was involved. Other people were able to be far more effective, unfortunately, than I was. But I was involved. There were Telegram groups trying to get people references and papers and get them to airports and alert them to ambushes and so on the way. I mean, that was a great underground thing that was happening there. People were being, there were lookouts around Kabul reporting in when known kind of Taliban enforcers were heading to which gates of which airport and getting certain people out of there and to the other gates and so on. I mean, that was something. The story of that will one day be written by people much better than me, and it was gut wrenching and it was sad, but it was people trying their best, and it was doing so in some very innovative ways. I suppose, yes. So to come back to your question with the Arab Spring was a really, really, really interesting thing for me, because I'd already gone through, Kosovo and seen what had happened in Estonia when Russia brought Estonia in 2007, more or less to a standstill, because it's a very online country, and brought it more or less to a standstill with wave upon wave of cyber attacks, all prompted by the moving of a bronze soldier, of a Russian soldier, in 2007. And then I'd seen Georgia, of course, and Abkhazia in 2008. So I was quite amazed by the 2010s when it all started happening. I was amazed that there was so much what I felt was naivety around, yes, and it was so much the kind of almost the Zuckerberg playbook. Yes, we will bring the world together. Social media will make them free. And you looked at it, and yeah, absolutely, there were ways in which Twitter and Facebook, of course, were helping to coordinate protests and helping to get people's stories out to a wider and experiences with the authorities and with authoritarian crackdowns and so on out to a wider public, in which circumstances diplomatic pressure could be used, and in other cases, let's look at Libya and Syria, public and Tunisia, public pressure was suddenly overwhelming, and Egypt to an extent. I think the problem was, though, that it was very, very quick. Mm-hmm. We were very quick, and I don't think everybody was. I think in some senses, commentators in America are still shocked that bringing people, making the world more transparent and bringing people closer in touch and all of that is a double-edged sword. And I think we saw very quickly that social media posts were being used by the authorities then to trace and crack down and identify and take a far slower form of revenge, against some of the protests. And again, we saw in Libya in, I'm going to say 2011.
Was it 10, 11?
10, 11, but I can check a date and get straight back to you. We saw there, global hacker armies joining in on Gaddafi's side in order to try to hack and to take down and to stymie and to confuse rebel positions of like the Libyan youth movement and so on. This is the new reality. And I think everybody loves the idea of, there's somebody, one person is,
responsible for everything.
The
puppet master.
And I do think there's a fascinating guy called Yevgeny Morozov, who's this American but originally Belarusian tech commentator, and he talks about tech solutionism. And at the beginning of this, I said, we've got the bigger arms, we've got the bigger Silicon Valley, we've got all of this, and to a man with a hammer, the whole world looks like a bag of nails. Well, he talks about tech solutionism and utopianism, and he says, the idea somehow that America has and that the West has, that whatever the challenge, there's an app for that. It's all right. We'll invent technology for it. We'll have an app for that. We'll win it with technology.
That's how checkout people lose their jobs, isn't it? A friend of mine says that tech is created by autistic people.
Right. Well, exactly. So yes, tech is created by people who are interested in the tech, not necessarily the human challenge or reading the room or whatever. So, and for me, it's been fascinating with that. Where you've got Mark Zuckerberg, from all reports, frankly unable to imagine that the thing that he sees as being this wonderful thing, Facebook and Meta and so on, was being used to coordinate the slaughter of Rohingyas. Right. So frankly unable to imagine. And I think we've had a blindness in the West, in NATO, specifically in the US. There has been a blindness as to whenever there's been a challenge in the cyber arena that's been human, and that's about whether it's cyber criminals or whether it's about whole populations going online to take down NATO strategic command, or whether it's been about disinformation or anything like that. The first thing they'll do is invest in some sort of technology that's supposed to be better at filtering it. They'll pump more money into Silicon Valley. And actually, it feels like the Ukraine conflict has been a wake-up call, in the sense that we are seeing that it doesn't necessarily, the asymmetry in tech spending doesn't always mean that will be the more effective platform. We are seeing, one of the things that, and, we don't know what's going to happen. It's still very early days in Ukraine. But, somebody wrote on Twitter the other day, the thing about starting information wars as Russia has is you might have, you might have put all the time into it. You might have but you can easily come up against a very online president like Zelensky, who's just really good at getting the message out.
Yeah,
so I think we're seeing that. I hope we're seeing a moment when the penny drops in the West, that bigger and better guns and spending and arms doesn't
translate.
It doesn't translate. It doesn't necessarily. It's no substitute for educating your population on what
fighting back.
What they're seeing. Exactly, and the techniques that are being used.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you, because one of these questions I was going to say. So I know we've talked already that there's various platforms that are going on. And you mentioned like porn sites where they're in the comments and so on, and another site you mentioned. And so I wanted to ask about communicating on these porn sites and social media sites that we haven't heard about, as opposed to in 2010, Facebook. Was used, and also the January 6th protests, when a lot of those people were found to be doing this sort of thing on Facebook, and some of them were arrested. Absolutely. So do you think the world has moved on from Facebook because they know that that's where the authorities look for these dissidents, online dissidents?
There is this. It's really. I've got this really. I keep returning to this, that we fail to measure the things we kind of don't want to consider. So it's really interesting that I've been in agency briefings. And government briefings where people have gone, I'm going to just give you an example now. This is exaggerating a little bit, but people have gone, here, look at this pie chart. This is what teenagers do online. 33% of the time they're looking for products and services. 33% of the time they're chatting with friends. And 33% of the time they're gaming. And I'm like, that's fucking not it. I know what they're doing online. I mean, for fuck's sake, everybody, we all know what teenagers are doing online. That doesn't show up because that's dark traffic, right? So people don't declare it. People don't talk about it. People don't. I mean, as far as I could see, I was the only person yesterday. I was the only person even reporting it because it's like, what, it's not cool for some kind of blue tick strategic analyst from the State Department to be going, oh, I've been on porn. I'll tell you what, I've been. But you can tell, and I've always held this. If you are involved in cyber war at all, for fuck's sake, have a look at the illegal download sites, have a look at the porn sites, have a look at whatever you
Mate, I don't want MI5 to come to your house again. We're letting too much out.
I don't mean the illegal porn sites. Yeah. I mean the MP3 is illegal, yes. Yeah. Porn strictly above board. No, that's fine. That last bit we better put off the record, right? But okay. But the key. I think the key thing is that there are, we've only just got the media and governments used to thinking about 4chan, for fuck's sake. We've only just got them used to the idea that there are in fact lots and lots and lots and lots of really, really, really hard to trace, hard to plow through. It's a lot of legwork copies of Reddit, basically. And there they all are. They're Reddit for badness. And, that's where a lot of cyber attacks are organized. That's where, to be honest, a lot of information offensives, especially, on culture wars, a lot of mobbing attack, all these sorts of things are organized there, but they are not the only places. So dark traffic will flow where dark traffic flows. And I think these places, one of the key birthplaces and training grounds of cyber warriors through the 2000s and kind of early 2010s has been places like, I don't know if you remember, like LimeWire.
Okay, yes, I do.
Mozilla and all of these places.
They're all on my old Macs, I think, not on my new...
Yeah. Only use them on a Mac, never use them on a PC. They absolutely screw it. But yeah, because those places were messaging platforms at the same time as they were download platforms. They also gave you access. I don't know whether you know, but if you chose to show people your files, you had to be very, very careful what else they could see on your hard drive. So that the great birth of I suppose intelligence trolling against the West came about in large part. There was
people wanting to download music.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff. I mean, extremists were doing it in the UK, right? So I went in 2000. What was it, 2008? It was during the mayoral election.
Yeah.
And I went on a couple of these download sites and I downloaded, I wanted to, this was for research, and I downloaded a Baby Shambles, which was Pete Doherty's band. Baby Shambles, something. Because I was looking at what was in, a lot of weird things came zipped in the files. So I was looking like, and you'd open what claimed to be a Baby Shambles, archive file. And in it, suddenly there was all this stuff from the BNP.
Oh, wow.
It had a folder in it. No Baby Shambles MP3s. It was called The Londoner, Please Read and Distribute. And it was a guy called, I think, Richard Barnbrook was the BNP candidate for Mayor of London. Didn't get many votes, but it was all full of racist literature. It had mocked up pictures of women in burqas, flicking V signs at people and robbing shit. Right. And it was, and I went at the time, I went to the Standard. I didn't know. I went to the Standard, the Guardian, the Telegraph.
Editors you had contacts with.
A couple of other places, yeah. And I've got the replies, and some of them I talked to on the phone, like, well, we don't understand. The BNP, they're a political party. They're allowed to campaign like anybody else. And I was like, no, what you don't understand is the story isn't that the BNP is campaigning. The story is that they are choosing things, for example, they're choosing to create little Easter eggs out of online gaming files, out of these things that are
targeting young people. Yeah,
young, exactly. That are going to appeal to young Londoners and perhaps anti-establishment or perhaps whatever London that are going to appeal, and they are using those as illicit means to get through violent campaigning literature.
So is this in your book? Because I'm wondering if you're like giving me breaking news here. This is like quite, this is very new to me.
A while ago. No, this was a while ago, but this is going to be, there's more about that in the book. There's more about all of this in the book, but it's absolutely, our clay-footedness has been, in the West, our clay-footedness to understand the dual edge of the internet and how it can be used against us and against various other people. It's, I know this is a trendy word to use, but it smacks so much of a kind of almost like the privilege of hegemony. It's like, it's easy to be a Silicon Valley billionaire or Donald Rumsfeld or whoever you want and say, oh, it doesn't matter. We've got the biggest, we've got the best armies, we've got the biggest. What you fail to understand is that the world is full of almost like digital Viet Cong, who may not have your resources, who may not have your budget or your firepower, but do have the burning urge and need to try to even the score. And I think that's what we're seeing in Ukraine. We're seeing a bunch of people. Russia has fooled itself in the same way that we were fooling ourselves. Russia's gone, oh yeah, we're kind of the big bear in this region. We're kind of the cyber war 4th level ninja chess masters. We'll just roll it. And I think what they've found is that again, this idea of they're blinded by the privilege of their position to how effective not just the internet, but this entrepreneurial push and this unceasing innovative drive to resist and to subvert is as a weapon. I think they've missed that, and I know it's early days.
So, what would So Ukraine, they are way ahead of the game. Let's say, as Zelensky, what would be your advice to people in countries where they aren't winning the information war, such as in Afghanistan? Well, we've talked about Afghanistan, but maybe in Yemen, in Nigeria, in Armenia, the Houthis. What? Because they're getting bombarded and they're not getting any help from the West. What would be your advice there?
Yeah, I know, and I actually, I'm I find that quite shameful, to be honest, and I think it's really uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable to me how everybody's pushed the boat out, and before we get onto the Houthis and so, how everybody's pushed the boat out for Ukraine, the right thing to do, but how the best that a lot of people could manage for even Afghanistan was playing for dogs. And I think I think the idea of not my problem, not our backyard, spheres of influence is pretty poisonous. I think either you have
radical empathy.
Exactly. Humanity involves being human and recognizing our shared humanity. And I think the problem is that it's actually, I think part of the problem is that we've reached an age in politics where everybody is thinking before they do a right or wrong. Everybody's thinking, how will this play with the very worst person? How will this play with the intolerant people from over there? How will this play with And I think we've got to a point where everybody's triangulating. You can see it in British politics where people are like, oh, what will the key message be for the taxpayer? It's like, well, what's the key message for the human inside the taxpayer? Is this right or is this wrong? So I wouldn't presume to tell people over there what they can do, except to say that as one of the things I've seen with Ukraine is that the government has been very, very good in the visible act of giving the world permission to become involved. So I think there's,
regardless of whether outsiders, the diaspora, may be prosecuted for some of it in the end. But what I would say to you is that this has been really, really good. I'm going to stop because I know you have to go.
Oh, God, I'll stop. Yeah, of course I've forgotten. I was having a good time. Thanks.